I have to behave myself now. Me too.
You know what? I'm dripping here.
Put the handle up on the back. There you go.
Right in that spot with Phil in the back. Right in front of Angela and Kate. And when Misty comes,
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How are you doing? Good, good. We're going to start with an impromptu drumming, just to kind of get ourselves centered of one body and one spirit, one mind, one breath. So I would invite those of you who have a very deep drum, you're going to be the foundation of this piece. So we just need a simple beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep going. All right. Everyone who has a smaller drum, I want you to go like this. Opening reading. Our opening reading is by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. If you don't have an order of service, there are extras. I'm going to kind of wander around the circle so everybody can see me while I'm talking. Our opening words. Blessed be you, harsh matter, barren soil, stubborn rock, you who would yield only to force, you who would cause us to work if we eat. Blessed be you, perilous matter, violet sea, untamable passion, you who, unless we fetter you, will devour us. Blessed be you, mighty matter, irresistible march of evolution, reality ever newborn. You who, by constantly shattering our mental categories, force us to go ever further and further in our pursuit of the truth. Blessed be you, universal matter, immeasurable time, boundless ether, triple abyss of stars and atoms and generations. You who, by overflowing and dissolving our narrow standards or measurements, reveal to us the dimensions of God. Blessed be you, impenetrable matter, you who, interposed between our minds and the world of essences, cause us to languish with the desire to pierce through the seamless veil of phenomena. Blessed be you, mortal matter, you who one day will undergo the process of dissolution within us and will thereby take us forcibly into the very heart of that which exists. You who batter us and then dress our wounds. You who resist and yield to us. You who wreck and build. You who shackle and liberate the sap of our souls. It is you, matter, that I bless. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. So the next song is a call and response song that I'm going to teach to you. It's very simple. It's a Mary Gregolia piece. I love Mary Gregolia. There's a lot of around. He sang one of her songs for Mother's Day, I believe. I can remember it right now, but it was a beautiful song. He did it incredibly well. So this song is called Strong Is What We Make Each Other. It's very simple. I sing a line and you sing it back to me. Make each other flowing through you, flowing through you, flowing through me, flowing through me, birthing life, birthing life. Birthing life, birthing life, pain and vision intertwining, pain and vision intertwining, flowing through you, flowing through you, flowing through me, flowing through me, birthing life, birthing life, birthing life. Birthing life. Love and justice guide our journey. Love and justice guide our journey. Flowing through you. Flowing through you. Flowing through me. Flowing through me. Birthing life. Birthing life. Birthing life. Birthing life. Strong is what we make each other. Strong is what we make each other. Flowing through you. Flowing through you. Flowing through me. Flowing through me. Birthing life. Birthing life. Birthing life. Birthing life. As Unitarian Universalists, we are a people of the covenant. There is no creed or doctrine at the center of our faith. Instead, we are bound to each other by the sacred promises that we make to each other, to ourselves, and with the earth. So please join with me in reading the covenant of our congregation, Eliot Chapel. As a free congregation, we promise to one another our mutual trust and support. To create beloved community, we promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be. To listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart. To speak responsibly and respectfully. To find ways to improve our church for all members and friends. There'll be a lot of music today, a lot of singing. And I'm going to invite Rich to join with me in teaching you our next song called There's a Love. And this is written by a Unitarian Universalist composer named Elizabeth Norton. And so I'm going to sing it line by line so you can hear it and repeat it back to me for the first verse. And then we will sing the first verse again and then the second verse twice. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, that's
All right, we have another song to listen to. Louder Living the Song of the Potatoes. In C sharp, apparently.
Verified that.
Yeah.
Pardon?
We have verified that.
You have verified that?
Yes.
And if you want a story about
We've
the
got a
song of
tuner.
the potatoes, listen to the YouTube of today's service.
Okay.
okay. I thought you were going to teach me.
Yeah, so here's the song. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding me. I rest in this love, rest in love. I rest in this love, rest in love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding me. I rest in this love, rest in love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding us. I rest in this love, rest in love. One more time. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding us. We rest in this love, rest in love. Thank you. So for this message today, we are going to create this message together. And I want you to take your instruments, and there will be pauses where I ask you to make a sound of what I just said. Your interpretation of what I just said. There's no mistakes. No perfection needed. This is a matter of creation from the heart and soul, from the depths of our being and the depths of the earth. So whatever happens to come out of your instrument, let it be. Let it be. So I want us to imagine that it is 542 million years ago. Yeah, that's about it. That's about it. It's a long time ago. It is so long that it is hard to imagine 542 million years ago. Well, between 542 million years ago and 2.6 million years ago, the land that we are sitting on right now did not exist. If we were on the same sea level now as we were back then, we would be up in the air, and the ground would be way down below. You would have to be on the back of a dragon, or on the back of a large bird, or in a helicopter or a glider to be where we are right now. And below us wasn't land, actually, it was sea. Because at that time, if you can imagine what tectonic plates are. Who knows what tectonic plates are? You know. So if you imagine a volleyball and all the different shapes of a volleyball, the tectonic plates that we are on was actually shifted to the bottom of the volleyball. We were close to the equator. And this was a large sea, as far as the eye could see. We were in an ocean, it was warm, it was tropical, there were tropical animals, tropical plants, and in this sea were many, many shelled animals, and fish, and other animals that lived in the sea. What does that sound like? All of that life. And what would happen is that those shelled animals would die, and their shells would filter down to the bottom of the sea. And then all the plant matter would filter to the bottom. And then the shells would be on top of the plant matter. And over millions and millions of years, the sea floor filled up and up and up and up. And so where we were, where we are now, was the bottom of the sea. What does that sound like? All that water flowing around. That's right. And then the weight of all that water, and the weight of all that sediment pushing down is what created rock. Deep underneath the surface. Rock upon rock. What does that sound like? Right, solid, heavy. And then there would come a time when the tectonic plates would shift, and then all of a sudden the land rose and it became dry land. And where we are now was the top of a very large plateau. The bottom of the sea, it was flat, and everything was dried out, and plant matter grew, and forests, and birds, and plants, and we kept shifting north. Those tectonic plates kept shifting north. And this happened over and over and over again. The waters would come in, the sediment would build up, rock would be formed, the waters would recede, the land built up, all kinds of life would be formed for, say maybe 1 million point something years. And then the water would come back. And when you drive down the interstates and you see the rock that's been chilled away, each layer, the thick layer, is when there has been sea here. And the thin layer is when it was land. So you can imagine how many millions of years it took for the layer that you see at the bottom and then the layer that's at the top of those cutouts that you see on the interstate. It took millions and millions, hundreds of millions of years for that rock to form, and then the land to form on top of it, and then more rock to form, and more land to form, and then all of that became rock. So where we were standing now, we are now at land level. But in fact, time continued on, and more sediment developed, and more rock, and where we're now would have been all rock. with rock extending way up beyond where we are now. And then the land was up there. And where we are now might have been a cave, it might have been solid rock, but it sure wasn't air. It sure wouldn't be somewhere where we could sit around a campfire. That's for sure. So we've come a long way. And then about 2.5 million years ago, the water receded for the last time, at least for now. It's only been 2.5 million years since the water receded. So we can be pretty sure it's going to come back someday. But for now, here we are. But now we are under rock. And then the glaciers started moving down from the north. And the glaciers stopped just north of the Missouri River. So no glaciers were here, but they were over there. And when they started melting, that's when things really started to shift around here. The Missouri River was created. The bed that it follows now, that was created as the glaciers melted. And all that water started seeping through what would become the Ozark Mountains. We are at the edge of the Ozark Mountains. And over millions and millions of more years, it started to wear away. The water, the wind, the sand that was in the water, the sand that was in the wind, scrubbed away at what would have been this place until we got to here. But in the process, the soft rock washed away and the hard rock stayed. And that's why we have hills and valleys. Because the valleys are where there was mostly soft rock. And the hills are where there was mostly hard rock that was much less easily eroded. And that is how we come to stand here after millions of years of erosion. What does that sound like? And here we are. When I first came to St. Louis in 2005, I spent most of my Sunday afternoons driving on I-44 to Springfield, Missouri to see my partner. And I was always wondering what I was seeing. How did that ridge happen? Or how did that valley happen? Or that river? Or that bluff? What were the rocks I was seeing? And how old were they? Have you wondered these things as you've driven on the interstate through the state of Missouri? And then during the pandemic, when so many of us were binge watching, to get through the time, we discovered a show on the History Channel called How the Earth Was Made. And we watched every single episode, and it became a game for us. We would decide the focus of that show, whether it was the Alps, or the Siberian highlands, or the Great Lakes, or the California coast. What created it? Was it an earthquake? A volcanic eruption? Was it glaciers? Glacier melt? Water erosion? Wind erosion? It was a game for us. And so as the show went on, we go like, it's going to be, it's a volcano! Yes! Or, oh yes, that was water! Oh, that one was definitely air. That was definitely wind. So many things that could have happened to create our Earth. And what it did for me, and I think one of the reasons that as Unitarian Universalists we love images of nature so much, is because it helps us to remember that we are not the center of existence. This was not created for us. It never was created for us and for our enjoyment and our amusement. Even though we've had a wonderful time here this weekend, the hill we're standing on was not made for Eliot Chapel to take over, to be given in 1960. We're so insignificant compared to all this. And even though we have chiseled almost the entire earth to serve ourselves, what we've done is a second of time in trillions upon trillions of seconds before us, and trillions and trillions and trillions of seconds after us. Not that we have any excuse to turn away from what we have unleashed on this earth, but it's good to have some perspective on how little we matter in the larger scope of things. And while we do know it is our responsibility to deal with the mess that we have created that has damaged millions upon millions of years of evolution on this earth, it's good to know that someday none of this will exist as it is now. Who knows what our plastic is going to turn into a million years from now, and how we'll be remembered. How be remembered by plastic is how we're going to be remembered by. So let us have a moment of silence, reflecting on the millions of years that brought this land and all of it, including us, to this point in time. So next we're going to shift away from the natural history, the geological history, to the human history. It's a lot shorter history, but from our perspective and the way that we experience ourselves on this earth, it is a very, very significant moment in time. So we used to think that human beings first entered North America 10,000 years ago over a land bridge between what is today Russia and Alaska. What does that sound like? But we now know that it actually happened 30,000 years ago, and that people first arrived on this continent by boat. That is how long the First Nations or the indigenous people have been on this land. And we also know that 1,200 years ago is when the Osage people arrived from Ohio into what is today modern-day Missouri in this area. And they fought a long battle with the Missouri people for who would dominate this area, and they won. So this became an Osage area, beginning around the year 1200, like our time, AD or CE, Common Era, right? That we use now, we use Common Era now. And we also know that that battle meant a whole lot for what would come later when the French arrived on this continent in the 1600s. And all of this area was considered part of the French Empire. The indigenous people did not consider it part of the French Empire. But the French sure did. And because of where we are, the Gasconade and the Missouri River, this was an important place because of the confluence of those rivers for the fur trade. And the fur trade is what dominated this area in terms of trade for several hundred years, until 1802 with the Louisiana Purchase. But until that time, relationships were forged between the French and the Osage. In fact, the French encouraged their people, their coureurs de bois, which is like the carriers of fur, to marry with the indigenous people that they wanted to have a trading relationship, to cement those relationships. And those people eventually came to be called the Métis. They don't exist here anymore. There are Métis up in Canada, mostly in the western prairie provinces, but a whole new people was formed because of that fur trade and because of the relationship and the interest both sides had in that trade. But in 1802, the English arrived. Sorry, the Americans. Sorry, you're not English, you're American. The Americans arrived. What does that sound like? The Americans weren't interested in fur trading. Everything was extinct by then anyways. They were interested in farming. And what that meant is that the indigenous people were in the way. In Missouri, they were in the way. And the Osage having seen what happened east of them, knew that it was a losing battle. So they agreed, in exchange for land in Kansas, that they would leave Missouri and they would cede this entire state to the newly formed Missouri government in 1820. Those who did not leave willingly, that was the Indian Wars. And we do not know how many atrocities were committed in this area to remove the indigenous people from this area so that Americans, white Americans, could settle here and build up this land. What does that sound like? What does the absence of indigenous people sound like? Then in 1848, something really big happened in Europe. It was called all the revolutions of 1848. And all these countries, France, England, Poland, Germany, all the newly called middle-class people wanted democracy. They were tired of having feudalism. They were tired of monarchs. And in Germany, they rose up in rebellion against the emperor, and they lost. So they decided to come where there was a democracy. They came here to Missouri. The Germans came en masse in the early 1850s. And they came to this area, and they saw the beautiful Missouri Valley. And they thought about the Rhine Valley and its vineyards, and the Rhone Valley and the vineyards, and the Mosel Valley and the vineyards. And they decided that this was their new home. They were called here, and they planted the vineyards in this area that are still here to this day. What does that sound like? And then another group came. White Southerners came to this area. They came from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama. They were plantation owners who came here because the land was cheap. They were running out of land in the South. And the Appalachian people came as well, although they were poor white. They came as well because of the cheap land, and they wanted to escape the poverty that they experienced. So we had a massive influx in the 1850s, just before the Civil War, of white Southerners who supported slavery. This area was part of what is called Little Dixie, because these plantation owners brought their enslaved people with them to as well join the vineyard industry. And this was a hot seat of resistance during the Civil War. There was guerrilla warfare in Gasconade County between the Germans, who were anti-slavery and pro-union, and the white Southerners, who were Confederates and pro-slavery. All through this area. There's no place here that was safe to be, because it could happen anywhere at any time. What does that sound like? And in fact, it is often said that because of that massive influx from Germany to Missouri, that is why we stayed in the Union, because they willingly fought. And they did not want to return to any form of dominance and oppression over their people, and they wanted the end of slavery. That's how Missouri stayed in the Union, and that's how slavery ended in this state. One of many, but the Germans were a very large part of it. This place is called Bergfried. So we can assume that the first settlers who owned this piece of property were likely German, which meant that it's likely that there was no enslavement on this piece of property. We don't know for sure. We can be reasonably assured that slavery did not take place on this property. What does that sound like? So let's have another moment of silence to reflect on the human history that has shaped where we stand. significant moments in the 20th century. During World War I, the German population in Gascony County went to great lengths to create distance with their heritage. Many names were anglicized. German was no longer taught in the schools because it was taught alongside English in all those schools in this area because of the strong German population. German was never spoken in public anymore, and there was even a shift to eat American-style foods. What might that have sounded like? World War I ended. And it is said that in the Missouri Valley, the Depression didn't start in 1929 because of Prohibition. Prohibition decimated this area because all the vineyards had to be shut down. And those who wouldn't shut them down ended up in prison. So the Depression here started in 1920. When it started in 1929, everywhere else. And this devastated the Missouri Valley and all the towns along it, including Gasconade and Herman. It took a long time for the vineyards to recover. And during that time, in the 1920s, that is when Dr. Julius Lingenfelder dreamed of an oasis for the weary and the sick and those who needed health of the mind and the body. And his dream when he bought this property was that this would be an oasis. A shelter, a haven. It didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And then his son, bring my phone because this is all on my phone now. And his son took over, bought some additional land, and we believe that he farmed. And then Dr. Julius Lingenfelder, he died. And then Richard died in 1953, and he was buried near his father at Bergfried. Does anyone know where those graves are, the Lingenfelders? One's pointing there, one's pointing there. Where are they? You know, the long-timers here? Well, anyway, they're buried over there.
There's two cemeteries.
Yes, there's two cemeteries there.
One has a number of graves in it, and one has only one stone, so there may be actually more.
And then what happened in the 1950s? His daughters, Julia and Doris, who lived in St. Louis, became part of Eliot Chapel, wanted to give this land to an organization that would protect it, that wouldn't sell it for development, that wouldn't farm it, that would leave it in its beauty, the beauty that had been restored after years and years of working with this land as a farm. And at that time, what was going on at Eliot at that time? Eliot was just forming. Eliot had begun as a satellite congregation, the First Unitarian in St. Louis, in West County, and they were just deciding whether to buy property and buy a building, and they had bought property, although it's not where they ended up. They bought a first property before landing where we are now today. But then this is when we entered the history. This is when we entered the story of this property that used to be up in the air, then became the surface of an ocean, then became the bed of an ocean, then became rock, and then eroded away after the retreat of the glaciers to become what it is today. We have entered in a second place. So many times there would be no time, there would be no dot for it even on a timeline. But we have been here since the early 1960s. This has been our property to steward and to love. What does that sound like? Love it. And here we are today. So much has happened on this piece of property. There has been conflict and division about this property from the very first. Because the vote to take on this property was at the same time that votes were being taken on buying property, building a church, building an RA wing, and people thought, how could we possibly do it all? But they voted to accept this property, and the conversations have continued about this property for a long time. But what has remained constant is what? Weekends like this. What else has remained constant about this property? You all who've been here and have been here even this time, what is this property to you? What does it mean? Connection? Nature? Solitude? Good hunting.
Time changes out here.
Time changes out here. Peaceful.
Our teenagers love this.
Pardon?
Our teenagers really love it.
The teenagers love it. They're coming this fall. The teenagers are coming this fall.
Yay!
What else is constant on this property? What hasn't changed?
Turtles.
Turtles?
Ticks.
Ticks?
A riddle.
A riddle?
As someone who's never been here before, I wondered about its place.
Wow. As someone who hadn't been here today, she wondered about its place in our congregation. Let's have a moment of silence to reflect on that. So when I get disillusioned with the state of things between us on this earth, and the state of things between us and the earth, and all that of life that is on this earth, I think about this long history, and realizing that we aren't even a blink of an eye, it gives me comfort. It gives me comfort and curiosity. Who knows what will happen here in the next 2.5 to 542 million years. Not that we should turn away from the unjust sufferings of our time, because after all, someday all this will be completely transformed by powers out of our control. But it helps me to remember that we are not the center of existence. And as we make poor choices and stronger choices and then poor choices and then stronger choices about our relationship with all that is, the earth will always have the last say. Being here on this land with the trees and the sky, the flowers and the bird song, the cicadas and the ticks, the grasses, the wind, the sun, the rain, and we've had it all this weekend. We are literally touching an earth that is having the last say. Amen and blessed be. Other moms do this. birthday. The earth is having its last day with me. The earth is having its last day with me. The earth is having its last day. The earth is having its last day. The earth is having its last day. Please rise if you're able. The earth is having its last day. The earth is having its last day. The earth is having its last day. Ha ha ha! The earth is having its last day. Ha ha ha! The earth is having its last day. Ha ha ha! The earth is having its last day. We'll close with our final hymn. Spirit of in this chapter, it's turn, turn, turn. And I think those have been handed out. So we're talking about
Are there any more copies?
If you don't have the copy, we will know the turn, 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 right?
Yeah.
Everybody can join in the turn, turn, turn. Oh, thank you. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn.
Everything time, time, time. There is a season, time, time, time. And a time to every purpose under heaven. Time to depart, a time to rebel, a time to care, a time to live. Time to care, time to everything. Turn, turn, turn. There is a season. Turn, turn, turn. And turn to every purpose under heaven. And the time to every purpose under heaven. The time to give, the time to lose, the time to rest, the time to sow, the time for love, the time for hate, the time for peace. There is not too late. Everything turns, turns, turns. There is a season, turns, turns, turns. And the time to every purpose under heaven.
Closing words are by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought or grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day, blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Amen and blessed be. And that concludes our worship service.
Oh, thank you.
I was doing mine and met yours as much as I could. Get a better sense of when you were doing
And they often have music while someone is singing. We don't bring
Otherwise, we're going to be forever.
as long as it's soft, you can hear the speaker. You know, you need to be able to hear the speaker. Yes, often during
I'm going to use the
prayer.
grills from over there.
Makes sense? Yeah. Well, yes. You're welcome.